Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into a really fun topic, how to fine-tune your English pronunciation.
Yeah, we're going to be digging into Beginner English Podcast Lesson 6 and looking at how to sound more natural and confident when you're speaking English.
Because we've all been there, right? You know the grammar, you've got the vocabulary, but then those tricky sounds trip you up.
This lesson focuses on some of those really common pronunciation pitfalls that a lot of Spanish speakers encounter when they're learning English, and it gives some really helpful tips for how to overcome them.
And we're going to unpack all of that today, starting with what might be public enemy number one, the dreaded "3" sound.
It's true, this one little sound can cause a lot of frustration.
The lesson really zooms in on this and that, two words that seem so simple but can be surprisingly difficult to pronounce correctly.
And it all comes down to the mechanics of how we produce sounds. In Spanish, you have those crisp dental sounds where your tongue touches your teeth.
Right.
But in English, the C sound requires you to put your tongue between your teeth.
It's like a whole different way of using your mouth. I remember struggling with the rolled R when I first started learning Spanish.
It's the same idea. You have to retrain your muscle memory, and the lesson suggests a really practical exercise for this. Practice saying this, that, while you're walking or running.
Love that. Make it part of your routine. This, that, almost like a mantra.
Exactly.
But it's important to remember that the "the" sound actually has two different forms in English, something that doesn't exist in Spanish, right?
That's right. You've got the voiceless "the," like in think or thought. And then you've got the voiced "this," like in this or that. And the lesson actually compares this voiced "th" to a slight lisp.
Okay, I've never thought of it like that.
It might sound a little strange, but think about it. When you lisp, your tongue naturally goes between your teeth, which is exactly what you need for that voiced fifth.
So it's like a secret weapon.
Exactly.
Instead of being afraid of the lisp, you can embrace it for that perfect pronunciation. And once you've mastered this and that, remember that those th sounds pop up in so many other words too.
Absolutely. You'll start to hear them everywhere. And the more you practice, the more natural they become.
Exactly. You'll start to develop that ear for it. Okay, now let's move on to another tricky vowel sound that this lesson tackles. The short "oo."
Yeah, this one can be tough because it doesn't quite exist in the same way in Spanish.
The lesson uses the word book as an example, and I think that's a really good one.
Definitely. If you try to say book with the Spanish U sound, it ends up sounding more like book.
Right, because in Spanish, the U sound is closer to the English long U sound, like in moon or food.
Exactly. So when Spanish speakers see the word gook written down, they often pronounce it with that longer U sound, which can make it harder for native English speakers to understand.
It's all about that quickness, right? Hitting that short U and releasing it instead of drawing it out.
Absolutely. And just like with the "the" sound, practice makes all the difference. The lesson recommends practicing with word patterns like look, cook, good, book.
Oh, I like that.
It helps you to really internalize that short U sound.
So what are some other words that you can think of that use that same short U sound?
Foot, cut, sun. So many good ones.
See, pronunciation practice can be fun.
It totally can be. And speaking of fun, are you ready to tackle the big one? The English R.
Oh, the R. It's infamous.
I know, right? But I promise you, it's not as scary as it seems.
Well, that's good to hear.
The key is all about tongue placement. Unlike the Spanish R, where the tip of your tongue taps your teeth, the English R is much more relaxed.
It's true. It's much more subtle.
Exactly. And to practice this, the lesson suggests repeating the phrase, sister paper, sister paper.
Sister paper, sister paper. Okay, I like it.
It seems simple, but it really helps you to get that tongue placement down.
And I've also heard people say that it helps to think about smiling when you're making the R sound.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Yeah, it keeps your tongue from hitting the roof of your mouth too hard.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works for you and just practicing.
You know, while we're talking about subtle differences in pronunciation, this lesson also mentions something I've never really thought about before, but I hear all the time. How Spanish speakers sometimes add an extra "e's" sound at the beginning of words that start with an "es" followed by a consonant.
Oh, yeah? It's a really common thing.
Like instead of saying Spain, it comes out more like a Spain.
Exactly. Or special becomes a special.
Right. And it's not something I'm even conscious of doing. It just feels natural.
It totally makes sense from a Spanish pronunciation standpoint because you don't really have those is consonant blends in the same way.
But I guess it can make it harder for native English speakers to understand sometimes, right?
Yeah, it can sound a little bit off to a native speaker's ear.
It's like you think you're making the word easier to say, but you're actually making it harder to understand.
Exactly. So in those cases, it's all about breaking that habit and practicing those consonant blends until they feel more natural.
No more extra E cushion.
Exactly. Just attack those consonants head on.
I love it. And it really just goes to show how many subtle little things go into mastering the sounds of a new language.
That's so true. It's a process of constantly fine-tuning your ear and your pronunciation.
And it's not about erasing your accent entirely. It's about making it work for you.
Right. Your accent is a part of who you are, and it's a part of your journey learning English.
So embrace it. And speaking of embracing the journey, what other advice would you give to our listeners who are working on improving their English pronunciation?
I'd say the most important thing is to just keep practicing and experimenting. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how you learn.
I agree. Mistakes are proof that you're trying.
Exactly. And have fun with it. Listen to music, watch movies, try mimicking different accents. The more you expose yourself to the sounds of English, the more natural it will start to feel.
That's great advice. And before we wrap up, I wanted to say that one thing I found really helpful when I was working on my pronunciation was actually recording myself speaking English.
Oh, that's a great idea.
It can be a little painful to listen to yourself at first, but it really helps you to identify those areas where you need a little extra practice.
I love it. So there you have it, folks. Practice, have fun, and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
And remember, every little bit of effort you put in takes you one step closer to your language goals.
Absolutely.
That's it for today's deep dive. We'll see you next time for more language learning adventures.